Alright, so in this video I'm just going to show what my setup is for VS Code with compiling and running C++ programs. So I'm just going to start off with the extensions tab over here, and I'm going to say that I do have two extensions that I've built into here for C++ running and compiling, which is the Microsoft C and C++ compiler, and I do have this random extension that just runs my code by this random person online. So Visual Studio Code is project-based using folders. So in VS there were projects that you could create, but in VS Code you can just open up a folder. So I'm just going to create a folder called test folder over here, and I'm going to be using that as my project. And what I'm going to do in this one is I'm just going to create a new file by clicking on this little icon over here, or just like going into new file over here, however you want to create it. So you can see that Visual Studio Code has already done a couple of things. It's opened up a debugging console over here, or terminal. It's you can open up a new terminal by clicking on this guy over here. It's recognized that I'm going to be using a C++ language over here. I think that's by the file extension here. So in order to start writing in C++, I can just write a super simple hello world program, and VS Code is like doing things in the background where it's actually checking if my syntax is right or whatever using the IntelliSense from VS. And so now that I've got my hello world program written, and in order to run or debug it, I'm going to have to configure two main files. And to configure those two files, the first one is to debug it, and the second one is to run it. So to configure the first file to debug it, what I'm just going to do is I'm going to click on this debug button, or Control-Shift-D on my keyboard, and then click on this no configuration drop-down, click on add configuration, hit C++ or GDB, and just configure this in the same way that I do every single time that I run this, or I just copy over these two files to whatever folder I'm going to be using this. So get rid of that text in program because it's going to be using the same working directory. Don't open up an external console, and the path to GDB is going to be the same for every code. GDB is the debugger, the some GNU debugger. So what you can do for that is you can just go into, I think it's this PC, the operating system, MinGW, bin, and if I'm not mistaken, GDB is in here, so I'm going to copy this, put that in here, change the backslash to 2 forward slashes, and also going to say gdb.exe. And then in the end, I'm just going to do pre-launch task equals build. And this tells it to run this build command before it's about to run this debugging command. So in order to create and tell it what this build task is, you're going to have to configure its task. So you hit Control plus Shift plus, I believe it is P. So if you hit Control Shift P, then it opens up this thing right over here, and you can just search for configure task. And configure task has this task.json that it can create automatically. And if you hit others, it creates this file right over here. So this is where we get to use that build, and we can give it that command g++, ggb, and all.c++ files. And so now we've configured these two files, task.json and launch.json. If you look under our folder, it's put them into as this secret VS Code folder that you can just drag around into any of your directories. And if you drag those around in your directories, you'll just have this built in, so you won't have to do anything special. So now in order to run this, you can just hit F6 on your keyboard, and now this will run that code. So you can see hello world did get printed. If you want to see something cooler like the actual debug window, then let's say we have like a variable x, which is 5, and you want to change x. I don't know what that did. You can pass x into that function, so you can just create that function, change x. And you can, let's say I pass that by reference, and I just change that x value to like 10. Notice that x doesn't have to be named x here, it can be named y, but it'll still affect that x value. And I think I'm done. So if I print x before this, then it will get printed as 5. And if I print it after this change x, then it should get printed to 10. So we can see the execution of that using the debug window. So in order to set a breakpoint, click on like 11 over here, so that sets a breakpoint in there. Hit F5 on your keyboard, or just Control-Shift-D, and then hit this green button over here. So you can see that it's starting up the debugger. It's starting up the GDB debugger, so now you can see x is initialized to some garbage value. If you hit next, x gets initialized to 5. You can, right when we print it out, if you look at the terminal window, I don't know, if you look at, it should be somewhere. I don't know. There's a place where it got printed. I don't know where it is right now, but it like printed it out, and so the value of x was 5. And then you can step into this function, or you can step over this function. If you step into this function, you'll actually go into this function up here. So you can actually go into here, and you can see what's happening with x. So if you look at x, the local variable x has, it's not in this function, so you can't see it over here, but it's been passed by reference, so y holds the address of x, so they're both essentially the same variable. And so x got changed to 10 right now, or y did. And right when we got back, you can see x has the new value of 10 when it comes once it comes back, and it prints it out somewhere on the terminal window. So now we just completely compiled and debugged the program on VS Code.